back. As I said earlier on this morning, that I don't know anything, but what I can do is to find people who know everything and bring them to be able to explain what's going on in Afghanistan. What's interesting is that our guest speaker, Ajmal Khan Zazai, he's got a title actually. I'm Lord Stone of Blackheath, but I prefer the elected Paramount Tribal Chief. I think I'd like that as a title. But I was talking about the fact that I was told 10 years ago that maybe a solution would be to reform the lawyer Yurga and have the tribes come together and try and find a solution. And that is exactly what he's done, which is create a United Afghan Tribes Yurga, and he's the chairman of this, and therefore is trying to work some solutions there. We as a government and we in the West think we can sort everything out, but what's interesting is that our guest has come all the way from Afghanistan without problems to come and talk to us here, and then to get from Oxbridge to here, he couldn't get here because we've got strikes and temperature. So we have to sort it ourselves out. Anyway, because, as I said before, I know nothing about this subject, but I've got an expert who does. What we will do in this hour is that our guest will speak for maybe 20-25 minutes about the situation, and then we'll have a conversation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord Stone, dear guest. And first of all, I would like to give you my regards, and sorry for coming late. I would like to speak a little bit about Afghanistan, the situation there. Unfortunately, we know all about it. I think we hear in the news, and we discuss the failures, and we also identify the successes in last, I would say, 16 years. But the main problem is that we are facing right now is the migration issue, and this is what this meeting is all about in the conference. And also, we would like to identify, as William indicated, to the way forward. So what are the solutions? This is exactly we are going to tackle. And I don't want to spread too much about the history of Afghanistan, but our Princess Zohra is sitting here with us. We had a long history of peace and stability in Afghanistan for 43 years. So what happened? Why all of a sudden we become a nation of partially terrorist and partially Taliban, and a bad name came into the world? What happened? The root causes of the problem that we are facing today is the Red Inqilab, or the revolution, which happened in 1979, the invasion of the Soviet Union. So the Black Days started from 1979 and onwards. And today the situation that we have in Afghanistan after the democratic system was in place, I was the first, I think, in the UK, through friends, Justin Glass is sitting here, William Morris is here, and all our friends, that they give me a platform to discuss Afghanistan as today. And my main worries, as I'm not, Lord Stone would say that I'm not an expert, I'm a grown man in Afghanistan with politics, with wars and conflicts and issues. So my few points agenda was that we have to bring accountability and transparency. Transparency means that I was always giving the example to the Americans that if John Gotti is the vice president and Al Capone is running the country, what is going to be the fate of America? So basically what we have in Afghanistan is worse than Milosevic and Kordovich running the country. And with a free hand from the international community, and especially, well, first of all, I do not want to criticize anyone, but the US, when they intervene in Afghanistan, they give a free hand to these criminals, war criminals, to run the country. So we have that black point number one there. And then they enforced Eloy Jirga to prolong the transitional government and so forth. And then the election came in. So we accepted all that with all due respect. We accepted the election, the democratic process and everything. But unfortunately, inside the democratic system, or the structure wasn't given in the hands of the wrong people. If it wasn't for the educated Afghans who spent 30 years or 25 years in the West, if they would have been giving a bit of, like a platform, they could have changed the face of that country. So number one, if I'm holding a Canadian or a British passport, if I want to be a minister, I have to surrender my passport, which doesn't make any sense. In the Northern Alliance, usually these war criminals, they enforced these things that if someone is educated in the West, they call them dog washers, all the names you can think of in the world, and then they have to be in power. So this is the number one problem, that we have to really accept the fact. Second problem, I've always said that indiscriminate bombing of the Americans on my villages and towns and places, that really sparked the insurgency. Corruption in the government is in a very large form. When my president, Mr. Afghani, was in London, I think you all witnessed and you saw all the news, he was here for the corruption meeting. In the corruption meeting, we were supposed to discuss the ANA imaginary troops, which is $4 billion is given by the American taxpayers to us, but we have 20 or 30% imaginary troops there. Doesn't exist, but their salaries are taken. So we have got about $800 million worth of schools built, and they are imaginary schools. So where is the money gone? And so forth. So the issue was that Mr. President would come here and he will address and discuss all these issues one by one and highlight them so we all know where is the problem, and we tackle each problem, find solution for it. But instead of that, he came up a bit aggressively, criticizing the British nation to be all addicts. And he said, well, the problem we started in my country is really drug production. I have stated this over and over, that the drug problem is not really limited to Afghanistan. It is mafias of the regional mafias, which are from Turkey to Central Asia to Iran and to Pakistan. They are involved. That got nothing to do with the governments. Why they could not eradicate it, that's a different story. You can ask your generals and the people who were in charge of Helmand and those places. But I'm coming to the point now. If we would have the Taliban government in Kabul, and we had the influx of refugees coming to the West, I would accept the fact. Yes, there is a brutal regime of Taliban. People are not happy. There's a war. There's a poverty and everything. But we have to pay attention that there is a democratically elected government in Kabul, backed by the Western countries, with all the billions and trillions spent there, and still I have 150,000 Afghans coming to Europe. You guys have to ask your government, what is happening? Why you voted for Labour or for Conservative Party, and they become prime ministers and they become ministers, and then they are not answering to the British nation? They have to answer. What is wrong? What have you done wrong? Why the lives of my sons and daughters and my brothers and sisters were shattered in Afghanistan for 14 long years, and billions and trillions of dollars were spent there, and the result is that I have ended up with 150 to 180,000 Afghan refugees in Europe. That's another area. When I criticize, I have the solution for the problems. When the solution time comes, I think it's in a different panel, I will present a small little plan. Maybe it's acceptable or not. So we have a situation in Afghanistan that we have a democratically elected government, and we have a unity government, which we all know about it. Unfortunately and sadly, I was the one who was campaigning very hard for President Ashraf Ghani, because I was very tired of Karzai for the last 14 years. And I think through the medias, and it's all been accurate information, that through myself, about 1 million votes came, and I campaigned very hard for Ashraf Ghani to become president. But the day he made a decision to become part of the unity government, I boycotted him. Because in Afghanistan, we can't. And I've said all this all the time, that when a man is in power, he has to have authority in order to make things happen. And he couldn't do it without that 50%, unfortunately, so I backed off. And I didn't even meet him afterwards. So that's a different story. But the problem is right now that we're facing is also regional problem. What I'm saying about regional problem is the Taliban is not anymore an entity. They're a brand, like Gucci, Armani, whatever. They can make glasses, they can make suits, they can make ties. So that means Taliban is a brand. Taliban are used by Iran, by Pakistan, by China, and by Russia. So everyone has their own brand, and you will have a war. And the war will continue because we have a situation in the Eastern Europe with Poland and Romania, and we have a situation in Ukraine. And we have a conflict situation between Europe and partially America with Mr. Putin. So the only way that Mr. Putin is going to come and bite is Afghanistan, and the war will continue regardless of, if you're continuing the same strategy that we're putting in place, unfortunately, till the American troops leave. Once the American troops leave Afghanistan, mark my words, I'll write it and sign it, they will set the American embassy on fire in Kabul. That's exactly what the design of Putin, Iran, Pakistan, and China is. It's greater, it's bigger than imaginations. With few thousand troops, with few drone attacks, having the warlords and criminals running the country, this strategy is not going to work. All the billions and trillions wasted, the lives of soldiers wasted, and there's going to be a day that the American troops has to withdraw from Afghanistan. Today, the efforts which are put in place by the Indian government is very much appreciated. India did not have this much support in Afghanistan. We lived in Pakistan for 25 years or 30 years. Pakistan hosted us. We have tribal ties with Pakistan. On the belt of, Durin line, we are the same tribes divided into two, Pakistan and Afghanistan. What is it today that all the Afghan sentiment is so much against Pakistan? It's because of these Taliban groups are supported by the Pakistani ISI openly and sent to Afghanistan to put bombs. Yesterday, 2 bombs, William, blasted in Kabul. They did not, one of them targeted a parliament member, and one just ordinary shopkeeper on the street, he blew him up. So when all this thing happened, with a few things that India did, building one parliament building for us, one Salma, that electric dam, and a few other small projects, I would say 70% the Afghans are pro-Indians. So this is what it is, winning hearts and minds in Afghanistan. Going back, I don't want to go back to the history, Lord Stone, but 1919 we had a war in Afghanistan, and that I think all of you, mashallah, has read the history. We had a conflict situation there. Forget about the 1919 war. I'm talking about the 1980s war with the Russians. Unfortunately, sadly, some of the people in the world are awarded by God with knowledge and wisdom, but unfortunately we, Afghans, are awarded with the only wisdom that we have to continue fight. So we need, the international community need to take that little thing from us, that we also have to have the wisdom for future and live in peace and harmony. The problem that I have always emphasized and indicated is not political in Afghanistan. We don't have a religion problem in Afghanistan. The only problem in Afghanistan that we are facing is poverty. Through my resources and things from 2008 till 2012, I have managed $20 million from the USAID into my province, into my constituency. I built roads, I built retaining walls, and these are so effective that almost it brought me to a limelight. And the support that I have today is because of those $20 million in 4 years that I put into my people, building them retaining walls, roads, canals, and small dams for electricity and so forth. Small things. And this is always I emphasize that we have to do things for the ordinary people, for the 30 million or 25 million Afghans. But sadly and unfortunately, 2,000 crooks and criminals, they destroy the entire country. 2,000. They're not even 2,000. So if we calculate that because of 2,000, the 30 million people are upset, is this wise to really keep the 2,000 people on our side and support them? It's not wise. So what needs to be done? Alteration. As they said in the United States, they said, this guy doesn't fit our mold. I say, well, you better fix your mold. There's got to be some problem with your mold. What I'm saying about the mold, we got a radical situation. We got to take some radical steps in order to fix things. That's not how we're going to continue democracy. I'm not against democracy. Democracy is a good thing. But democracy is a good thing in Europe. Because Churchill said this is the worst thing in the world, but it works for us. What I'm saying, the tribal structure we have, the Loya Jirga, as Lord mentioned it, that is working for us. So why not marinate the democracy in the tribal structure in Afghanistan, to marinate them and work together? Back in 2002, when the Loya Jirga was convened, 78% from the Loya Jirga voted for our king, God bless him, to be the running the country. 78%. But they said, no, Khalilzad and the rest of it said, no, you can't do it. Democracy, The king was not against democracy. He had the support and the backing of the people of Afghanistan. But no one has listened to the people of Afghanistan, because some guy sitting in Washington with double PhDs, he writes a paper about Afghanistan. And I have faced this myself. And when I went there, I said, well, when I discuss about Afghanistan, and the person is telling me, well, I've been to Afghanistan a couple times. I was in the U.S. Embassy compound. I said, you're writing a paper for the Congressional Committee on Foreign Relations. You're telling them, advising them about Afghanistan, so you don't know anything about Afghanistan. She ran away from me. This is the problem. People who are the homegrown people, who know the politics, who day-to-day think, nobody listened to me. In 2006, Justin Glass is the EAG director here. I have cried loud. Forget about this gentleman, ladies and gentlemen. Back in the 90s, my father was a good friend of the United Kingdom. Through our friend David Simpson, we have identified the problems which is facing by the Al-Qaeda in Europe and also in America. No one listened. Justin Glass is my witness. No one listened. No one. The agenda of Al-Qaeda, because why would we know about Al-Qaeda? My father was an Al-Qaeda leader. I was in Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda basis was in my village. In Jaji, which is Zazai is my last name. Zazai is my area. We had them there. We knew everything what they were trying to do. And we sent all information to the British intelligence. No one listened. No one. And then 9/11 happened and so forth. And now we have ISIS, and God knows what's going to happen next. I'm sorry for taking your time. There are problems we're facing. But one other thing which I'd like to mention, how important is Afghanistan for West? For me as an Afghan, it's extremely important to have partnership and relationship, not only with West. I like to have great relationship with Pakistan, with Iran, with Central Asia, with China. But my strategical partnership is already with the United States of America and Britain and Europe. I like them to invest in my country, in business and trade and so forth. And lead us from this misery to a better life and take us to 21st century from the 14th century that we are living right now. If Afghanistan is important for America, if Afghanistan is important for the West, we really need to talk, and we really need to discuss the situation, the future of Afghanistan, and find a better way to go forward. But if Afghanistan is not important, then it's not your headache. There's few thousand troops. They just leave, and we're going to go back maybe to the Stone Ages or whatever we do. So the main point is that we have to ask the governments here, and also the governments in the United States, if Afghanistan is important, then they should listen to you guys, and they should listen to maybe a small little guy like me, that we should show them a little bit of way that this is how we're going to proceed and we're going to go forward. If not, I have one other thing to say. I was 11 years old when I migrated to Pakistan with my family, because my father was against the Russians, and he was apprehended, arrested, and it's a long story. So we came to Pakistan, and I was 16 years old. I was fighting the Russians myself, and I wasn't, when I'm thinking now, my son is 22 years old, and I see him and myself, we were like huge, big difference. And all we did until 1984, that we were burying our mujahideen in Pakistan, because so many dead bodies were coming. So every day I was going to high school, and we were going for prayers in the mosque because we had condolences, and a lot of mujahideen were killed. The Americans realized that we lost the war in '84. They gave us Stinger missiles in 85. The first Stinger missile was fired from Torgar in Nangarhar, and a helicopter was shot down. That was the end of the Russian Empire. In 86, the Russians were ready to leave Afghanistan because they couldn't fly their helicopters or jets or whatever. So now is the science and technology time. If America has the technology in science, I'm sure the Russians and the Chinese has it too. If tomorrow there will be no drones to fly over Afghanistan to target this guy and that guy, if a helicopter cannot fly, and if a jet cannot fly or B-52 bombers, it's end of the story. And we don't want to repeat the 1919 incident that 35,000 troops from British Raj was slaughtered in Afghanistan. This is the country, this is the terrain, it's a very tough terrain, it's a very tough people. And I think it's time that the United States of America consider and alter some real policies if they want to stay in Afghanistan. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, so maybe 25 minutes of questions and comments. It's interesting to me that what I said before you arrived was that what's needed here is not people who think they know what to do, but people who realize they don't know what to do, and that unfortunately you've been interfered with by too many people who thought they knew what to do. What's really interesting to me is that at the moment I'm trying to work with Israel and Palestine and also with Egypt, and I am realizing what you were saying about democracy, that when you look at democracy, and we here, and I am part of this democracy because I'm in the House of Lords, so I'm part of the government. In fact, when we had a conversation just now, you were saying I might criticize your government, and I said, well, I'm Labour, I'm not really the government. He said, Andrew, you are part of the government, you're part of the government, you just might happen to be, so you are part of the government. And when I look at our form of democracy, it may well be that we get Trump in America. We look at the referendum we're going to have this week because we don't know how to make a decision about Brexit. And you can see how the EU is run by our democracy. And then in Palestine and Israel, you have a government which is a democracy that's thrown up that type of leader. And when you've got Hamas and Fatah trying to work out how you to run democratic Palestine. And I was in India only about a month ago, and I was meeting with a ministry there of Ayush, which is a ministry they have in India for their ancient traditional medicine. So Ayurvedic, yoga, homeopathy, and they have individualized medicine, which is 5,000 years old. But our science, Western science, says, oh, we want personal medicine, we want a different solution to each person, but we can't see it in our science because you have to have science of 5,000 people tested on a drug, and you can't have individual medicine. So the reason I'm saying this is that what I feel is that there is something about democracy, there is something about the way in which you must have transparency and faith in what you govern, but for each country and each region it has to be different. And what I then got involved with here is how can you have an Afghan type of democracy which is not Western democracy, but on the other hand it's not just running it by some potentate, and how do you mix those together to bring the knowledge that we do have, but not say you do it this way, to say here's the knowledge, how can you do it your way? And that I think is what we're here for. So who would like to speak? Okay.
Khalid Redeem, Citation Movements Forum. Thank you, Ajmal, for your presentation. Firstly, Ajmal, do you think at the moment the West's focus is not on Afghanistan because of what's happening in Islamic State and Syria and Iraq, because all the resources are being directed there rather than towards Afghanistan? And secondly, what do you do about the situation with these young children in Afghanistan? Paktia, I mean, the children being used by the Taliban to infiltrate bases, and then they're working for the soldiers, even as lookouts, and they've been killed, and they've been used in bombings. I mean, there's a sense, I mean, they're young children. I mean, do you think something can be done about this? They've been used by both sides, by the government forces and by the Taliban as a means to get into army bases. And this seems to be a very prevalent use at the moment right across Afghanistan. And the government say they've been trying to tell people not to use these boys, but they say they can't do anything to stop the troops, because the troops say we want them to come in and use them. I mean, I think it's a very, very sad situation where some of these children, I mean, about 9 or 10, the way they've been brought up, and no one is doing anything to protect them. I mean, I think there is a sense here, I mean, that something should be done by the Afghan government in a more rigorous way to stop this happening.
Well, one thing is that the ISIS is not limited to to Syria or to Iraq. I mean, we see the cells here also in Europe and so forth. But in Afghanistan, I think it's identified that the ISIS, it doesn't have that strong links with Syria or Iraq. In some parts of Afghanistan that we have done a survey, there is a link to the Syrian and Iraqi ISIS, which is in Kunar only. It's a very tiny little spot. The rest, which is the ISIS exists in Afghanistan, is created. We don't know who behind this, and it's a very controversial thing. Suicide bombers. Some information that we have is Haqqani has about 300-400 suicide bombers stocked all the time, and the age is really not fixed yet. Some people are 45 even, some 40, some 30. It really depends, Khaled. It's not really all the time is like the young boys are like 10 years old. They do, because a 10 years old kid, if you show him all the video and brainwash him, if 16 years old kid, he's a dynamite. I remember myself when I was 16, I was fighting the Russians, very furiously. And if you see my photos and things that you will not recognize, it's me. And I never was afraid of death. I was going to the valleys and fighting and everything. So because these people are the brainwashed. And the other problem is that we have a lot of madrasas in Pakistan, a lot of them. And they're like mushroomed in every street, in every corner. And that is really, fueling the Taliban. It's a problem. I mean, right now we have a huge big problem on our hand in Afghanistan. If you say one problem is not there really, is insurgency, is health, is social life, you name it, poverty and unemployment. So really we have a basket of problem, sadly and unfortunately. No one is doing anything about it, Khaled. Thank you.
Thank you. The back, second from back row. No, the next one first. Right, thanks. You're after that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paramount Chief. Michael Smith is my name. I'm head of the business programs here for Initiatives of Change in the UK. And I've been reporting, you mentioned the fundamental need to address poverty, and that implies the need to focus on areas of economic development, very specific areas of economic development. I've been reporting the work of a development expert, a British development expert, who's been working with the Afghan Ministry of Mines in developing the gemstone industry. Afghanistan is very, very well known, of course, for its historic gemstone deposits going back 5,000 years. And so I've been reporting the work of a woman who's been funded by the World Bank to work with the Afghan Ministry of Mines in developing the gemstone industry. So I wonder if you have any comments on the specific areas of economic development that might be possible to address the root causes of poverty. I mean, one wishes that the poppies, the West could pay a decent price for the poppies for morphine rather than for heroin. But I just wonder if you have any observations specifically on economic development.
Mr. Smith, let me ask you one question. For example, you're making £1,000 a week, and that's about £4,000 a month. You're paying your mortgage, you're paying your fees, you're paying your, filling your fridge and all that. What if I pay you £6 a day? Would you survive? You can't survive. But for £6 a day, I have done it for 4 years in 21 provinces throughout Afghanistan, that I literally made my people to sleep. When I say sleep, I made them tired of working every day, building canals, roads, and things, community development projects in their respected areas. And then when the nighttime they go home, when the wife put the bread or food in front of him, he's so tired that he sleeps. It brought insurgency to very low level, and I proved it to the American army. And I was in Bagram, lecturing the generals and colonels of the American army and telling them, listen, this is the insurgency that I bring it low because of $6 a day. It's very cheap. But, yes, I agree with you. The mines in Afghanistan, unfortunately, is not going to be taken tomorrow because they need, proper structure and, company has to go there, all that. But before we do that homework, we need to do these projects. In Afghanistan, we have 70% uneducated people. Let's say about 80%. And we have rural areas. Kabul is not Afghanistan, a few compounds here and there. So we have a lot of people living in the remotest area in the country. When the USAID asked my company to build a plan that how can we cover 400 districts of Afghanistan, 34 provinces, we made a plan, a blueprint. For $600 million a year, we say we can employ from 4 to 8 million people a year. That's huge. 4 to 8 million people we can employ. Because in 4 years, for only $20 million in my area, I have employed 46,000 of my people. And every household had $1,000 to $1,500 to $2,000 profit. And that really helps them a lot. When it comes to the gyms, you saw the report from the cigar that mostly the mines right now are under the control of the warlords, not the government. The warlords are taking all that and plundering it and selling it in Europe, and they're making millions of dollars, and not a penny goes to the Afghan government. If we do the homework right, and this is what I talked to our president now, during the election, when I talked to him, I said, Mr. President, you will be a president soon. We need this plan. And this plan is going to put your government in the path of the success. But he didn't listen to me. And the first thing I told him, I said, Mr. President, do not touch the peace reconciliation, because that is not your field. Do not touch the political breakdown or fixing the political thing, because we don't have it. Just work on these projects, grab some money from Europe, about $1 billion or something, even get it on a high interest rate from World Bank. We'll pay them after 5 years. Because this is what Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, in the Middle East is built. William, this is all the oil money. I need my oil money from my minerals. I have lithium, I have palladium, I have zinc, you name it in the world. There's 119 kinds of minerals, and 4 of them strategical, which is uranium, palladium, and I think few other lithium and so forth. These are worth trillions and billions of dollars. This is the money that I need to take and build Afghanistan with. Not the money that I'm begging every day on the streets that I'm going to feed my people, build schools and all that things. I don't need that. But for the homework, I need 5 years in order to pay my people every day so they can feed their families and do not side with insurgents to destroy the country. And absolutely agree with you. The mines is the only thing that Afghanistan has hope for. There's nothing else. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Tony Thomas. I've worked for some years with Initiative Change, now a retired accountant. On the matter of the tribes, Ajmal, do you have representation in the government, in the assembly? If not, could you have? Should you have? And is not one of the possibilities better representation from the tribes?
Afghanistan has been always a tribal country, and as my father and everybody else said, Afghanistan is the past, the future, and the present, the future belong to the tribes. The only reason that the kingdom in Afghanistan survived for 43 long years, and Princess Zora is sitting here, and she's the witness, she's the family, royal family, is because of the tribal leaders who are supporting that government very strong, very strong. So a tribal leader in Afghanistan is kind of your MPs, but your MPs are elected for 5 years, and they are there for 5 years regardless of what they do. But in our structure is a bit sensitive. I'm a tribal leader today. Tomorrow the tribe say, no, he's not good. So that's a next day thing. And they can vote us out. But when a tribal leader is there, or Khan or Maliks, and these people are highly respected, and when they make a decision, then thousand people accept those decisions. So we had the structure, but the structure was unfortunately destroyed by the communists because a lot of people were killed and so forth. So the communism revolution, which started in Afghanistan, they said, oh, this is for the poor people. So we started a revolution in Afghanistan, the communism. Communism is equality. Equality is for everyone. But I tell you something, Tony, that during our fighting against the Russians, not a single Malik or Khan or tribal leader was killed in fighting. It was the poor guy who was killed. Because the Malik and the Khan were sitting in the back and sending the Mujahideen to fight against the Russians. This is how Afghanistan works. When we had a new democratic system in Afghanistan in 2002 and so forth, the tribal structure was really ignored in a big way. The Loya Jirga, which was convened, and the Loya Jirga approved the constitution of the country, which is the highest, beside Quran. This is what the Americans say, no, this is important. So it's highly regarded. The tribal structure was destroyed. We don't have a representation. A system which was put in place for last 3,000 years or so forth was totally ignored. One of the reasons that the failure is taking place in Afghanistan is because of this system was ignored. People from the communities who had nothing, no name, no families ties, no ruling authorities, they were giving places in the government. The warlords and criminals who were regarded by the people as the culprits of all the crimes that they have committed, they were giving high position in the government, as I mentioned. And that's why the tribes got somehow stepped back and they just said, okay, we'll wait. And then in the period of the waiting, things go wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. On that last point, not analogous, but in Somaliland, former British Somaliland, further Hargeisa, not Somalia, Mogadishu, they actually have a democratically elected assembly and a House of Elders, the Gurti, which is elected from tribal elders. On my limited experience in southern Afghanistan, the problem is the drug lords have so taken over and perverted and destroyed the tribal system that it's been weakened in a way that I think in Chief Ajmal's region in the east has been less badly affected. On the point of narcotics, my last time in Afghanistan, though some years ago now, was notionally in a counter-narcotics role, that branched out into many things. The problem there is that a great proportion of Afghanistan's agricultural potential is in the Helmand and Arghandab valleys, so basically Helmand and Kandahar. There is agricultural potential, though limited, but narcotics is not just more lucrative, it helps fund the Taliban and various other undesirable characters who actually put pressure on people to grow it. If you can grow other crops, there is often no market. The infrastructure is such that whereas opium and heroin can be easily transported, most agricultural crops need storage facilities, they need to be transferred, they need a market. Doesn't exist, the roads don't exist. The Afghan National Police are often licensed bandits who actually harass people in legitimate trade. So though there is something that could be done, what little can be done hasn't been done. In terms of opium itself, unfortunately, I'm afraid something of a red herring, the idea of buying the Afghan opium crop. There is an adequate supply of opium for morphine purposes in the world at current levels of production. Now, if Africa and Asia used morphine-based medicine in the same way that we do in Europe and North America, there would be a greater demand. Unfortunately, even then, the price that legal growers of opium for morphine production get is considerably lower than the price for illegal opium. And on a very technical level, there are certain varieties of the opium poppy that are better for morphine production. And a lot of what is grown in Afghanistan wouldn't be up to the standards concerned. There's actually a British expert, one of the few who deserves the name, Michael Mansfield, who's done a huge amount of work and covers in detail, continues to cover in detail, the whole opium problem. It is tied up with the Taliban insurgency, with the general instability. Unfortunately, it's also sabotaging by its existence what chance Afghanistan has to grow more of its own food and to export. And though, as has been rightly said, it's not, there's no magic bullet, alongside mineral production, Afghanistan could do more if it wasn't for the blight of opium.
Can I make just one quick comment, Charles? Is that once David Cunningham, he's one of the, I think, Australian colonel, he's advising the, Petraeus at the time, and we had a meeting at House of Commons here, and I was there. So he mentioned that it's the farmers will get about $8 billion. It's an $8 billion industry, so that the farmer is going to get billions of dollars and so forth. It's a very, very touchy subject. The people who are cultivating poppy in the Helmand, in those areas, believe it or not, they're all landowners. And they're very large landowners who are part of the Karzai in the present government. They are the Khans and the Maleks, unfortunately. They're not the ordinary farmers. There are some maybe 5% to 10%, but the Nurzai and the Popalzai, they have, thousand and thousand of acre land, and they cultivate the poppy, and then they are the biggest controller of that. So even they were controlling, I think, the insurgency. I think part of the deal that Helmand was sort of like made a deal with the British Army. I think the British Army, your army, you're probably covering it up, but I hear from some other resources that these warlords were making deals with your army that, if you, eradicate our poppy, we are going to make sure that, your bases get, missiles attacks and so forth. So you leave us our poppy cultivation, and we're going to leave you alone. So this was the cover-up things, which, the rumors or conspiracy ideas, but there is some stuff like that. Another problem is that if it's $8 billion industry a year, and if you divide the $8 billion on all these farmers, so we don't have any starving people in Afghanistan. All these people are billionaires. This was part of the deal within the Karzai government and within the present government, that these people are so powerful that you and your army couldn't break them, and the American army couldn't break them, with all the respect with B-52 bombers and so forth, because there is no well. So in the minute that they were going to eradicate the poppy, there would be attacks on your bases in Bastion and Kandahar and so forth. So that was the kind of, keeping the balance.
Okay, we'll take two more questions, and then this was the problem, and then David Lloyd Webber, after break, is going to find the way forward with the solution.
Yes.
Okay, so, yes? All right.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask the question now, if this is all about problems.
No, if you've got a solution, bring it. Yeah.
No, because as if I may call you, Ajmal was speaking, I saw glimpses of possible solutions, from economic to the trust with India, the positive ventures. So I was asking whether there is a broad spectrum possibility with the support, or what is it, the support that's needed, and what are the solutions that are available to turn it completely around?
Well, as I mentioned before, there are solutions. Sadly and unfortunately, the relationship with India and Afghanistan is greater than ever. It's not only between the government, it's people to people as well, which is a reality, and we have to face it. With what India is poured in is $2 billion a year into projects, and these being really regarded as great, projects, and the people of Afghanistan would say 70% are pro-Indian, which, our friends in Pakistan is getting a bit upset about it. But that's how it is. We couldn't keep the balance, unfortunately. We tried. The government, Ashraf Ghani, is trying his best, and he did. His first trip was to Pakistan. He met with the military leaders, and the only thing that Ashraf Ghani was asking is the halt to the Taliban, infiltrating Afghanistan, which the ISI did not comply with it, unfortunately. And I think the government in Pakistan, which is the federal, the elected government there, they're not in power, or the Nawaz Sharif or the rest of it. So it's the ISI games that they're playing in a bigger scale, which could be the regional, with China, with Russia, and Iran, and the rest of it. But as regarded, the relationship with India, it will grow. There's no doubt about it. And Pakistan is accusing Afghanistan and India that India is using the Afghan soil against Pakistan. So far that we haven't really seen any attacks within Pakistan which has been carried by the Indians. But we have seen in the past some attacks in India which was carried by Pakistan. And recently, about 10 days ago, about 15 to 20 ISI agents were apprehended in Delhi with Afghan fake passports. And these were tipped off by our National Directorate for Intelligence. There is way forward, but unfortunately our government right now in place, that we have the unity government, is disabling President Ashraf Ghani in order to make really progress in development area. Ashraf Ghani himself is a good man, but unfortunately he's a bit weak. The government is a unity government. He doesn't have 100% say. So these are the obstacles. And then, as I said, a regional issue. Afghanistan is a regional issue. The conflict, with Poland, and the conflict with, Romania, and the situation in Ukraine, all it's adding to Afghanistan because there's the American presence. And back in 2015, we had some really sensitive, now it's not sensitive that time, and Taliban leaders went to Moscow. They had meetings, and I spoke to some other friends, and they said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yeah, well, this is the situation." They say, "Oh, well, the American way." So I said, "Oh, well," and it's left. And the Taliban partially are getting some resources from China, from Russia, and from Iran. It's not a conspiracy, it's a reality. So the people who went to Moscow, they had meetings in a high level of the Taliban, and then somehow it leaked information. And then on the second day, Mr. Putin said, "Yeah, well, we are talking to Taliban, so, it's fine that they have to fight the ISIS." Wait, ISIS doesn't really exist in Afghanistan. There's a partially in Kunar and Nuristan provinces, which is a very small number of the Arabs are there, maybe 20, 21 people. But the rest of the country, the ISIS that we have, is really, really supported by the ISI, unfortunately. So with all this problem of that we have in the basket, it's really difficult to have a way forward, with the situation or a solution that we're really looking for. Government is incompetent. There is problems in the government. There's problems on the villages side. There is this problem among the people. One Salma Dam or one parliament building is not going to solve our problem, unfortunately. I mean, this is the greatest gift. We really appreciate the Afghans, the efforts and the help that has been put by the Indian government, but it's not enough. So we really need to go to the grassroots level. And the grassroots level is that something I mentioned before, and we'll talk about it as well if there's a chance. Thank you.
Johnny, quick. You got to be quick. You are quick.
Ajmal, 2002, when there was an expert that came on the Constitution for constitutional affairs for Afghanistan, was regarded as a first structural part of the government. I've always wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on that constitution, because then Karzai cut it, and we know the different parts that he sort of pulled out to make a very mild constitution. Do you think the constitution in Afghanistan needs looking at again, and what was your take at that time?
Thanks, Johnny. Absolutely. 2010, again, Justin Glass is my witness. We have reviewed the constitution here in London, in a bar association of the lawyers in London. They review it. Julian Critchlow, our good friend, he's a great lawyer. And there's about 10 clauses in that constitution which need to be altered. It's not really the constitution that we can take our country to the 21st century, unfortunately. In the constitution, a lot of things are not clear. They have put a sentence, but without, translation. So there's no meaning out of it. It's really meaningless. It's not 100%. I would say about 60% is a meaningless constitution. It doesn't have any value. It really needs to be altered. It really needs to be fixed. There's so many things in the government as well, and one of it is this constitution.
How interesting. Just finishing on that, moving to the region that I know, is that we're working on a project where perhaps you have a Palestinian state, you have an Israeli state, and you have a confederation of the two states. And the greatest constitutionalists in this country, Lord Wolfe and Sir Geoffrey Jowell, have said that they would help to write a constitution. But they said to me, "Andrew, if we're going to write a constitution, it cannot be in just legalized terms in English, because it has to be accepted by the Palestinians, and it has to be in Arabic, and in the Israelis, and it has to be in Hebrew, and by the British, who can't understand legalese, but there should also be it translated into how we all understand it. So isn't it interesting that these constitutions, where you think, that's it, it's a subtle thing, again, that has to be made for the culture in which you're working. Okay, so that was amazing. Isn't that a good thing that I said originally, that if I don't know anything, you bring an expert, he knows everything. We've now got all the problems, and now we're going to have maybe another coffee break, or we're just going to go straight into the solution?
We can have a short coffee break,
Maybe
or
a
a short breather while we get our panel up here. Maybe bring your coffee in here if you'd like.
A comfort break. And can I suggest one other thing sometime during the day? I'm leaving sort of after lunch. Is that one of the things that you're talking about in terms of passion and compassion is understanding the complexity and understanding the divergent views. Do you have any time where you have a minute with just silence so that we can all be present? Do you do that during the day?
At the end of the day,
At the end of the day.
we're going to have a time of reflection,
Oh, good.
which everybody is invited.
Oh, good.
We will do that.
Okay. Because the other thing I must say is that in Parliament, we now have an all-party parliamentary group on mindfulness, and we have 130 MPs and Lords who have done an 8-week course on mindfulness. And now, when we sometimes have a meeting, we have a minute's quiet, where everybody then realizes that we're all there to try and resolve the issue rather than say our own thing, and it's quite effective. So I just... Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll-